The 2020 Trek Emonda was, from a traditional point of view, the purest road bike in Trek's lineup. It was neither a comfort/endurance type bike, nor was it an aero bike. It was Trek's climbing bike, and it did that well. The question is, will the 2021 Emonda add to that, or will it stray from its roots and blur the lines into Domani and Madone territory? Welcome back to the channel. So technically this is the second video I've done on the Emonda SL6. The first was a bit of a build video where I shared some of my initial thoughts, but in this video we're going to take a closer look at what differentiates this bike, the 2021 Emonda SL6, from its predecessor. So in short, we're going to talk about the new frame design, the geometry, how the bike fits now, and some of the other little details. Over the last week and a half, I've managed to get in some good rides, so we'll also take a look at my first impressions of how the bike rides. I'll give you guys my opinion on this particular model, the Emonda SL6 and the SL6 Pro. And lastly, we will talk about the highly contentious topic of the Emonda's weight. Is this bike worthy of the Emonda badge and the climbing routes from where it came? So far, there's a lot of people that don't think so, but I've dug up some numbers that might change your mind. As always, if you want to navigate this video, just head to the description below. There's a time code there. You can click on the corresponding time code to the area of the video that you're interested in. I want to start off this video by saying, in all honesty, how excited I am for this bike. I am more excited for this Emonda than I have been for any road bike. And it has to do with the evolutionary process and how similar this 2021 Emonda's process was to another Trek bike that some of you might be familiar with. Let me explain. This here is the 2012 Madone. Pretty unremarkable in the sense that the frame is rather traditional with round or oval tubing and no real innovative integration other than the cable routing. However, that changed in 2013 when the Madone became badass with its new and improved aeroframe and hidden rear brake. This was also the year I was flying, winning my category at provincials and in the fittest cycling shape of my life. And of course, my weapon of choice was a 2013 Madone 5.2 with Aeolus carbon wheels. Man, I love that bike. Fast forward to today, and it isn't too far of a stretch to see the same evolutionary process. The 2020 Emonda with its traditional tubing to the new 2021 model. Now with the same camtail airfoil design, just like the Madone got in 2013. And this camtail design is seen throughout the bike. The down tube, seat stays, fork, and seat tube. The head tube also gets more aero, taking the same design cue from the Madone and new Domani. A few other things to note. I really appreciate Trek's attention to detail. Finally, for the first time in years, I can honestly say I love this paint job. The brush chrome looks blingy without being over the top and adds a nice look and texture to the bike. Yes, I did say texture. Also, the go with speed lines is a fun touch. It is a decal, not painted on, like I mentioned in my build video. Handlebars are unremarkable. Seat mask cap has not changed. Methinks this is because it's the lightest option and probably provides the most compliance. Granted, this bike has no decoupler like its siblings. Lastly, the saddle I've yet to confirm a verdict on. I want to love it, but so far it's leaving a bit of a sore spot just inside my right ischial tuberosity. I've never experienced this from a saddle before, but we'll see as time goes on. Finally, fit and geometry. I was thrown off at first because the 56 comes with the taller seat mask cap, while 54 and below come with a short seat mask cap. This is a bit strange because the taller seat mask cap means that the minimum seat height, if you measure from the top of the seat to the BB, is 74 centimeters, which means that I can't even run this seat mask cap. I tried running it, it just clicked when I pedaled because it didn't fit properly. So I really wish Trek would include the shorter seat mask cap with this model. They've also shortened the head tube to an H1.5 versus the H2 in the older model, which makes this bike a bit longer and lower. Again, at first I was a little bit afraid of this. I thought the bike would be too low and too long for me, but as I've been riding it, it has proven to be really well balanced and extremely comfortable. As I mentioned in the video, just don't use Trek's sizing guide for this bike because I don't think it applies. So let's talk my first ride impressions. So just to give you guys a basis of how I evaluated the bike so far, there is a ride I do several times a week. It's right out my front door. It consists of 25 kilometers, 400 meters of climbing. It has punchy climbs, gradual climbs, some steep descents with twistier turns, some false flats. It's got a bit of everything. The convenience and consistency of me being able to do this ride several times a week allows me to benchmark this bike against bikes I've ridden in the past. So among those shorter rides, I was able to get a longer ride in. We went out to the Rocky Mountains and did an 85-kilometer road ride in the Bow Valley area. So there's a beautiful, freshly paved 50-kilometer piece of tarmac that climbs up 14 kilometers to Moraine Lake. If you are ever in Alberta, it is one of the best routes for sure. All right, so in terms of how the bike performed, I'll share 3 key points which I think are worth talking about. The first is the overall snappiness of the Emonda. It is a point and shoot type bike. Wherever you aim the handlebars, it goes without any hesitation or noticeable flex, especially when descending at high speeds through tight corners. Now, I've ridden bikes that have had a similar characteristic. One in particular that stands out in my mind was an Orbea bike I rode many years ago in Tahoe. It was incredibly agile. However, when you got onto a straight flat section, it felt like you were fighting the bike to keep it in a straight line. The Emonda, however, does not have this problem. Quick and direct when you want it, and on the flats, it feels like you could take your hands off and the bike wouldn't deviate an inch. To help illustrate this point, if you've ever ridden a motorbike, you know how when you get the motorbike up to speed, it holds its line. That's kind of what I mean. And I haven't felt that in a bike for quite some time, since my days in triathlon when I rode a speed concept, and that bike was absolutely remarkable at how well it held the line. So if you've ridden one of those, you kind of know what I mean. I think this has to do with both the aerodynamics of the bike and the geometry. Dialing in that head tube compared to fork angle, also known as a bike's trail. So in terms of handling, it's remarkably agile. That has given me a lot of confidence so far when descending fast, twisty roads. Not to mention the extra confidence you get from the disc brakes. The second point I want to mention is the frame stiffness. Second only to weight, stiffness is brought up a lot in the comment section, and understandably so. Having a long history of riding OCLV 500 frames, also known as SL frames, I can't remember one frame that when I put a hard effort in didn't have noticeable frame flex to some degree. Now, a bit of flex is fine and something I got used to, but on many of my bikes, including the 2013 Madone I loved, and my recent 2020 Emonda, when you got up to sprint, the wheel would rub on the brakes, or with the Emonda and disc brake setup, the rotor would rub on the brakes. Now this is a telltale sign that the frame is flexing. Even with the brakes perfectly set up, if the frame flexes, you'll get some rubbing. I am pleased to say that this new Emonda frame feels stiffer, and a few of the hard efforts that I put out to test the bike have not resulted in any brake rubbing whatsoever. It's also worth mentioning, in order to increase stiffness, a layup or tensile strength, i.e. a different carbon fiber is used, which can compromise comfort. But that's not the case. Even with the 25mm wide tires on this bike, the bump compliance and vibration dampening is still quite excellent. The last thing I want to mention about this bike's performance has to do more so with this current build, the Emonda SL6, and that is that I found the wheels to be a little bit sluggish compared to what I'm used to. And I'd imagine this goes for the non-pro version as well, as both these wheels are a bit heavier than the Olus Pro wheels, setup tubeless, that I've been riding. This of course is quite subjective. The wheels overall aren't extremely heavy, they're only around 1,600 and some grams, but they do feel a little bit heavy and slow to spin up. On the bright side, they do feel very stiff through the corners though. If there's a point to take from this comment, it would be to save the extra costs on the Pro model and upgraded the wheels down the road to at least the Aeolus Pro version or something equivalent versus the Aeolus Elites that come with this model. So bike weight. You know, I've been dreading talking about this, and I think because it's such a sticking point for most people, it seems that no matter what I say in my videos, whether I call a bike out for being too heavy, like in the Damani video, what's not nice to see is this bike is a bit of a tank compared to prior Damani SL6s, or in my recent build video of this bike, where I say that it is good enough at 18 pounds, or a bike sub 18 pounds is good. For some reason, whenever bike weight is mentioned, people get their backs up against the wall. So let's talk about this. Open up the question. Does the Emonda have a weight issue? So in the most recent video I did about the build of the Emonda, less than a week ago, there are several comments already pointing out that this bike is too heavy to be the climbing bike it once was. But let me read a few numbers. So we're talking about the SL frame here, not the SLR frame. The previous Emonda SL frame was 1,840 grams. That's around 4 and a bit pounds. The new SL frame is 1,910 grams. That's only 70 grams difference. That's less than a quarter of a pound. So what, right? This is the evolution. It should be lighter. Well, I think I can explain it a little bit further. So back when I bought my first road bike, weight weanieism which I admittedly had a case of, was isolated to a small group of people and a single web page. It did not seem as widespread of a concern as it is now. It could be just me, but it feels like an ever-growing population of cyclists consider bike weight as the single most important metric when evaluating a new bike. The amount of knee-jerk reactions that appear in the comment section of my video, like, this is supposed to be their climbing bike. Why is it so heavy? I think ignores a lot of important context. For one, this is the SL frame, not the SLR. It isn't going to be their lightest bike. However, it is the lightest SL frame among their road bike line, if that's worth anything. And more importantly, it is only 70 grams heavier than the previous SL model. But it is still heavier, you say. Well, on to my next point. Adding quality improvements like the T47BB, aerodynamics, arguably not necessarily on every bike, but why not? Frame stiffness, integrity, frame comfort, which making a frame both light and stiff demands more tensile strength from carbon fiber, which means a trade-off, often compromising integrity and comfort. Unless of course you choose a higher quality and or redesign your carbon fiber like Trek's new 800 OCLV, but of course this is going to cost more money. All these things are going to add weight, and what's impressive about this new model is that they have added so many quality improvements while only adding 70 grams. The third point I'll add about weight is that the components on this bike that add to the 17.88 pounds or 8.1 kilograms contribute to a lot of the excess weight. This new Aeolus Elite wheel set is not light, the bars, saddle, and tires are not light. I reckon you could drop nearly 2 pounds if you change those out, or 800 grams. Let's be fair, should you expect a mid-range SL6 model to have the lightest stuff on it from the factory? I mean, that's up to you to answer. Lastly, and in summary, it seems as though Trek has made a shift away from weight as the sole most important factor and has chose to innovate and improve their frames in other ways. In all reality, frame weight is static and has little impact on the overall performance compared to the rotating mass of your wheel set or the extra poundage you are carrying on your bike. For example, water bottles, seat bag, beer gut, you get the point. So does this bike have a weight problem? Some may still say yes, but I welcome the improvements and would gladly give up 70 grams. Now the SLR, that's another story for another time. Well, that pretty much does it for this video. If you can't tell by this point, I think this bike is dope. I'd even go as far as saying it's nearly perfect. Honestly, I'm having trouble picking it apart. And for me, that's usually not very hard. Just watch any of my previous videos. If you're still hung up on the weight, well, I have plans for this bike that may lend to some significant weight saving. My goal is to bring this bike's weight below the Emonda SLR6 build while costing less. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, happy riding.